We have an hour together, so we'll try to move through this and make sure that we allow a lot of time for questions at the end. So we'll start off with our introductions and objectives. We'll talk a little bit about the immigrant integration framework, which you may or may not already be familiar with, but it'll be a great overview. We'll be looking at the teaching skills that matter in adult education project and resources there, how they can support you in this work. We'll be talking about the EL Civics and the co-op system and how you can support immigrant integration at the classroom level through civics education. Last but not least, we'll provide an overview of the new community of practice in case you're not familiar with what all it entails. You've never been involved in one of these through CalPro, and then we'll have our wrap up at the end. So to get us started, I'm really excited to see many familiar names, but I'd love to get to know all of you a little bit more. If you could share with us, and I see Kristen already started us off with your name, your agency, what you teach, and what is one need or challenge your students face when it comes to participating in the community, their children's school, their own education, etc. And if you're not teaching, that's okay. You can let us know that you're an administrator. I think the challenge with all the platforms have great things about them. It's challenging with Zoom that you can't see if people are typing, if anybody's interested, doing different things. So thanks so much, Joanna and Jill, and for getting us started. Just as you're typing that, I want to share a little bit about myself. As I said at the beginning, my name is Marcella Mova. I work on CalPro. I lead the development of our annual module. And this year, our topic is supporting immigrant integration through civics education. And I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite projects that I get to work on and one of my favorite things to do. With me today, my partner in crime on this one is Hannah Schlosser. Hannah, do you want to introduce yourself just briefly?
Sure. Thanks, Marcella. Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah Schlosser. I also work for AIR and CalPro. I have been so grateful to be a part of the team developing and putting out this fantastic community of practice. Really excited to be here sharing a brief overview of it with you all today and hope to see you in the community of practice in the future. Thanks, Marcella.
Thanks, Hannah. So thanks to all of you who have already shared your name, your agency, and what you teach, as well as your need or challenge. And it's really interesting to see these as they come through. So we had ESL support for college classes. Students are challenged speaking to the doctor, children's teachers, etc. Let's see, things related to work, school and family. Oh, balancing work, school, and family. Yeah, I know that's a challenge for me as well. Childcare issues. Students need to learn about institutions in the US. A lot of non-citizens who want to get better jobs. Health mandates are challenging as well. Language level is a key barrier. And let's see. Carolyn shared, students in my class face the challenge of squeezing in time at the end of a busy time to attend class. They often have to choose between extra work, family responsibilities, or going to school. Yeah, I imagine that's really hard for them. Expanding their goals beyond earning citizenship. All right, well, great. So I think all of those are, I see a lot of themes coming out of there. So I really hope that you'll find something useful in today's webinar that you can take back and share or integrate into your instruction or use to support your students. All right, on the next slide, just an overview of our objectives. So through today's session, we are hoping that you'll be able to describe the structure and substance of the immigrant integration framework, describe the purpose of TSTM, that's the teaching skills that matter in adult education practice. That's just too many words, so we just call it TSTM, and how it supports implementation of the immigrant integration framework in the classroom. Identify the connections between the TSTM civics education lesson plans, co-ops, and the objectives of the civic and community life goal area, and that's of the immigrant integration framework, and list the goals, audience, and format of the new community of practice. All right, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Hannah.
Thanks, Marcella. So we are going to start with a brief overview of the immigrant integration framework, because of course that's the central element of our community of practice, and it's really the context that drives our learning, both today and in the community of practice. So to start, I'd love to hear, you can just indicate in the chat briefly, are you familiar with the immigrant integration framework? That's a yes or a no or a somewhat. And if you are familiar, what do you know about it? So again, are you familiar with the immigrant integration framework? And if yes, what do you know about it? Several no's coming through. That's great. That means that we get to introduce you to something really new and important today. So I'm glad to be able to share some of this with you. Dave says, yes, it has different key contexts for our students with rubrics for measuring growth. A little bit of familiarity. Good. Well, no matter where you are today, again, this is just an introduction, but we hope that it will get you interested in participating in our community of practice or sharing some of what you learned today with some of your colleagues. So before we explore the framework itself, it's really important to understand what immigrant integration is. The quote that you see on the screen comes from the Immigrant Integration Framework white paper, and we are going to be providing that link for you in the chat. And it provides the definition of immigrant integration that's going to frame the learning and discussions of our training today, as well as the module. And so the definition that we are working with is that it's a two-way process in which immigrants and the receiving society work together to build secure, vibrant, and cohesive communities. Immigrant integration means people are able to succeed in American society through progress in three overall areas: linguistic integration, economic integration, and social integration. And again, you can find that in the link that Grace has just posted in the chat. It's on page 3. I think what really stands out to me here, and what I want to reiterate, is that emphasis on the two-way process of immigrant integration. That really reminds us that it's not an immigrant's job to assimilate into society. It's not a one-way street, but rather the process of integration goes both ways, meaning that both the communities and the immigrants have work to do to grow together. So it's a shared responsibility and it's a shared commitment. And that's why we're all here, to learn about immigrant integration and to think more deeply about what our role is in it. So why do we have this focus on immigrant integration? The immigrant integration framework was developed with the understanding that the future of California depends on immigrants. California needs immigrants to enter and to grow the workforce, to support economic development of the state, and to participate in and encourage the growth of social justice movements, of civics and community programs. So in other words, it's what we all know, that immigrants are critical for the continued growth and success of California as we move into the future. And so again, a lot of times we think of an immigrant's success as being directly tied to their ability to communicate effectively in English. We might think that that's really the crux of it and it stops there. And while this is certainly a component of their success, it's not the only skill that immigrants need to integrate successfully into the community. This immigrant integration framework helps to highlight other critical skills that are needed, and it outlines a broad set of goals that immigrants may have. And that can help providers and community members better understand what it means to provide that comprehensive support for immigrants who want to integrate into the community. And so finally, the immigrant integration framework was also created with that understanding that not all immigrants have the exact same goals for their own integration into our communities. And the framework was designed to be adaptable to fit the diverse needs of immigrants, which you were all talking about in our opening chat today. Your learners have different needs, our students that we work with have different goals, and the framework provides a space for us to think about that and talk about that. So the graphic on the screen and on page 16 of the Immigrant Integration Framework, which again is in the chat, represents the different components of the framework. And we're going to use this today to kind of get a sense of what is in the Immigrant Integration Framework rather than diving deeply into the individual pieces. So at the center, we see those 3 center circles there, and they convey the overarching themes of the immigrant integration framework. So remember, we talked about how the successful immigrant integration doesn't just mean that everyone can communicate successfully in English. Instead, the immigrant integration framework highlights the need for integration in those 3 areas, which is linguistic integration, economic integration, and social integration, which again, you see right at the center of that graphic here. Then on the outside, we can see the 8 items around the 3 overlapping circles in the center, and those are the central goal areas of the framework. They're the long-term outcomes that our programs and partners hope individuals will achieve with support. And then after the framework was originally created, 2 additional goal areas were added, and you can see those at the bottom of the screen in those 2 boxes. The first is self-efficacy, and the second is digital literacy. We can see that self-efficacy and digital literacy obviously cut across all of these themes and goal areas, and really it's hard to imagine a learner's success without digital literacy skills and without self-efficacy skills. So that's why it was added at a later point in time. So on the screen and on page 5, you can see another view of those 8 goal areas. And I want to take just a moment to read them to you. So the 8 goal areas without the addition of the other 2, digital literacy and self-efficacy. The original 8 were economic security, English proficiency, credentials and residency, health and well-being, educational and career advancement, first language literacy, providing for children and family, and participation in civic and community life. If you take the time to read that immigrant integration framework, you'll see that it delves much more deeply into each of the 8 goal areas and the associated metrics of each of those goal areas. We don't have time to get into that level of detail today, but we are going to take a moment to reflect at a high level. So of course, we recognize that students' goals and needs will differ, but I want you to take a moment and reflect on which of these goal areas you think might be critical for your learners at this moment in time. So if you had to choose one of these goal areas, which goal area would you say is the most critical for your learners? And I'm going to ask you to annotate on your screen. If you've used annotate before, bear with me for a moment while I explain how to do it. There should be a bar at the top of your screen. It has a little pencil on it and it says annotate. If you click on that, you should be able to select the check or some other stamp, and you can go ahead and stamp on the screen. If you're not able to annotate, don't worry about it. You can put your answer in the chat too. That is totally fine. So again, if you had to choose one of these goal areas, which one do you think would be at this moment the most critical for your learners as a whole? Couple votes for economic security and English proficiency, health and well-being. I saw somebody mention health and well-being in the chat earlier when we were getting started. You talked about I think you said about navigating the healthcare system or about barriers to access with the healthcare system. Lynette adds in the chat, all 8 are crucial, but English proficiency is required for passing the citizenship interview. Yes, absolutely. I think that's a great point too, Lynette, in the sense that a lot of these goals, although they're presented separately on the screen, that they overlap with each other. And you can see how these overlapping goals can really impact our learners' experiences with integration as well, and their ability to reach their own goals for their own integration pathways. So thank you for sharing your annotate here. Carolyn also adds, a lot of students are dealing with housing insecurity. Yeah, and that any type of barrier like that can be can cause let's say curves in the roadway for our learners as they're trying to reach these different goals that they might have in various different aspects of their lives. So I think that's really important to recognize. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and clear the annotate. Thank you for sharing there. So again, we're not going to dig into each of these goal areas more deeply at this moment, but you have access to that document. And also, if you participate in the community of practice, we'll delve into these more deeply and understand the pieces of these goal areas together as well. And I want to remind you that the purpose of the framework is not to outline a one-size-fits-all path to integration for our learners. Just as you could see with your responses, and as I'm sure you've seen in your own individual contexts, learners have different needs, different goals, and different things that float to the top at different times. And this framework allows individuals and programs and communities to think about the various paths that immigrants may take or want to take to integration. And then it helps put plans into action and develop a common language for measuring and talking about progress and success. So with that knowledge, there are many ways the framework can be used in adult education. If we start at the classroom level, for those of us who are teachers, for example, the framework can impact decisions related to curriculum and resources, as well as instructional strategies, such as incorporating digital literacy or other instructional strategies that promote immigrant integration. And that's a big focus of the community of practice as well. But it goes beyond that. The framework can also be used outside the classroom as well, and it can be used to build a frame of trust and best practices amongst those who work with immigrants and other adult education program related services, such as career navigation or counseling and advising. And then there's also support services and partnerships. The framework can help to establish a system of community partners and referrals so that people aren't just working in isolation from each other. And finally, with data collection and reporting, the framework can articulate what is measured and what needs to be measured in the future. So the emphasis here is that immigrant integration is a community's responsibility, and each of us as individuals and as part of a system and as community members have an important role to play in that system. I know that was a very quick overview of the immigrant integration framework, and we really just scratched barely the surface of it, but let's pause for a moment and chat. What role has the immigrant integration framework already played in your work, or what role could it play? And I'd love to hear from you in the chat. And if you're feeling really excited to answer the question and you want to unmute yourself, I would also welcome someone to unmute themselves, but no pressure if you would prefer to write in the chat. As you're thinking about it, think about, you as an individual, think about your students' needs, think about as a program or as a system, what role it might play. Just remember that this spans beyond the individual, although we each as individuals definitely have a role here. Joanna starts us off by saying, I think it could play, oh, I'm sorry, my chat just scrolled. I think it could play a role in formulating our course outlines for the different levels. Yeah, curricular decisions, Joanna, that absolutely can have an impact on the decisions that we're making of what to teach, absolutely. Dave adds common shared language and focus areas across the state and support for measurement and growth. So again, we're talking about a system. And so if in order for a system to work and to be fully supportive, those are key components of that, the language and the measurement and growth, having data to be able to share those, the impact of the work that we're doing, or look at where we need to be providing additional services or making connections if there is a gap in what we're seeing related to the data we're collecting. Immigrant integration has always been key to my work, but it isn't recognized as a source of money for the adult school. Yeah, and so, and I'm sorry, I don't know your first name, but absolutely thinking about how advocacy can come into play here and how we can bring in other partners or community members to help us get that messaging out and to get resources we need to be able to do this work. I'm gonna scroll just a little bit. I won't read all of these to you. Understanding of the needs that are close to home and realizing that we matter to ensure our students and their families, as well as our community and our world, can be a better place. Make changes in our classroom to always make lessons be meaningful. Yes, that's going to be such a nice segue into the next part of the presentation here, but I really appreciate what you're saying, Lynette, about how we, especially because there's so many instructors on the webinar today, that we know this as teachers, we know that our relationship with our students, the resources that we share with our students, the way we communicate and interact with our students, it does matter. And so this is already at the heart of what we do, and the immigrant integration framework maybe helps us be more intentional or see areas where there's room for growth or areas that we haven't seen or thought about before. So thank you for sharing those ideas. We're gonna switch gears just a little bit. And in this new community of practice, we are really going to be focusing on immigrant integration at that classroom level and the implications for teachers in particular. So teachers can use the framework to promote immigrant integration, as we said, through their curriculum choices you mentioned, instructional approaches that go beyond developing just linguistic competency, and including creative strategies that embrace and celebrate immigrant contributions and diversity. So one way this new community of practice will support teachers in implementing the immigrant integration framework at the classroom level is through tools and resources provided by the TSTM project. So we're going to take a look at that project now. We started the webinar today with a brief focus on what the immigrant integration framework is and why it's critical for us to support learners and the immigrant integration framework, no matter what our role is. And the Teaching Skills That Matter project, or the TSTM project, helps us move from that why to the how, specifically in the adult ed classroom. For those of you who aren't familiar with TSTM, here's a brief overview of the TSTM project. It was a training and technical assistance project funded by the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education, or OCTE, and it was designed to support states and WIOA-funded grantees in teaching critical content while improving instruction. The project is focused on the central skills that adult learners, including immigrants, need for success in the multiple domains of learners' lives, such as school, the workforce, and/or the community. And so I'm going to provide an introduction and an overview of the components of TSTM in the next few slides. But in that community of practice, which we hope you will all be joining, and briefly in this webinar, we'll also highlight some TSTM tools and resources that teachers can use to help make instructional choices that better support the diverse needs of their learners, including those who are immigrants. TSTM supports teachers to enhance their instructional practices to better meet the needs of their adult learners as they take steps towards accomplishing all those diverse goals we've been talking about throughout the webinar, whether it's educational, career, personal, or community goals. TSTM gives tools and resources and skills to support them to do that. And in order to do that, TSTM has 3 major focus areas: the 9 skills that matter, the 5 critical topic areas, and the 3 approaches that work. Those 9 skills that matter, that's at the top of the graphic, those are the skills that learners need to be successful in multiple domains in their lives. And these skills were identified from research and previous skills frameworks. If you're familiar with the SCANS report from the Department of Labor in 1992, or 21st Century Skills Report from 2008, or even the Employability Skills Framework from 2014. If any of those names mean anything to you, the skills that matter were identified from that research. And we know that these skills can help immigrant adult learners navigate and succeed in spaces that may be culturally different from what they're used to. The 5 critical topic areas is the next component of TSTM. And these are topics that impact adults and immigrants in many ways in their lives. These topic areas overlap. They might be part of school or work or community, but they are highly relevant to their ability to navigate and reach their goals as well that go beyond the classroom. And finally, we have the 3 approaches that work as the final component of TSTM. And these are instructional approaches that help teachers to connect the skills that matter and the topic areas into meaningful and effective lessons. Those 3 approaches that work are research-based, and they're proven to be effective when working with adult learners. We're not going to go into each of them specifically today, but we will look at each of these components briefly. So the 9 skills that matter are, as I said, the skills that adult learners, including immigrants, need to succeed in multiple domains. So the skills that have been identified through the project have been referred to as life force skills. And just as workforce skills are needed for work, life force skills are needed to be successful in life. And these skills are, as you see on the screen, adaptability and willingness to learn, communication, critical thinking skills, interpersonal skills, navigating systems, problem solving, processing and analyzing information, respecting differences in diversity, and self-awareness. So again, I'm going to ask you to annotate. Use your annotate tools or type in the chat 2 skills that you think would be helpful for your learners who are immigrants to reach their goals beyond the classroom. So you might think about skills that you are working on with your learners, or skills that you can see your learners would benefit from a focus on. But if you had to choose 2, they're all important, but if you had to choose 2, which 2 would you select? Go ahead and annotate on the screen. Navigating systems. Respecting differences in diversity is coming up. Communication. And you can start to see the overlap here, right, between the Immigrant Integration Framework and the TSTM project. Problem solving. When you were thinking about those skills or those goals that were critical to your learners earlier, when I asked you to annotate related to the Immigrant Integration Framework, what skills on this screen would be helpful for your learners who are trying to reach goals in those areas? Great. Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. Does any brave individual want to unmute themselves and share an example of why or how one of these skills might make a major difference in your learners' lives?
I can go first.
Sure, thanks, Jody.
Yeah, a quick video. Hi. My name is Jody Williams, and I work for BPSOS. It's a community-based organization. We help Vietnamese adults in OC earn their citizenship and ESL, and we provide ESL classes. So I chose adaptability and willingness to learn because our students, the majority of our students' main goal is to earn their naturalization certificate, US citizenship. And so their adaptability and willingness to learn isn't as high as I would like it to be, just because I really want them to see that, after they become US citizens, they'll still be breathing, they'll still be alive. So what other goals do you have? When I ask my students, why do you want to become a US citizen? They say to vote. And I say, okay, what else? What else? What else? I'm constantly pushing them to open their mind and look at other ways that they can also, help their families and communities beyond just becoming a US citizen. So for me, it's very important for my students to be aware of the opportunities that are around them, specifically the community colleges that are around them. They can transfer, take higher level ESL, transition to the workforce, workforce training. So the adaptability and willingness to learn has to come from them, though, ultimately. I can want it for them as, more than I want it for myself, but if, it's the intrinsic motivation that has to take the forefront.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Jody. You said so many important things there. And one thing that it made me think about is how would learners, one of the things that you're talking about is helping learners learn about or become aware of the different either systems or resources or other possibilities that exist within the community that they may not know about, and how you're empowering the learners by having those conversations with them, by helping set them in a path that might open up new possibilities that they either didn't know about or didn't think were available to them. So I love that conversation that it sounds like you're having all the time with your learners, but also the fact that you're sharing that it's also up to the learners. And that really goes back to that two-way street that we've been talking about throughout this webinar, that, we recognize our learners as adults with their own needs and goals, and they get to articulate that. And so I appreciate that point as well. All right. I'd love to hear from each of you, but I'll be taking up all of Marcella's time. So I'm going to go ahead and clear all the annotate on the screen, and we're going to go on to the next component of TSTM. So the second component I had mentioned were the 5 topic areas, and the 5 topic areas are civics education, digital literacy, financial literacy, health literacy, and workforce preparation. I'm going to very briefly define these for you, but there are TSTM resources that define these more deeply. So civics education are education services provided to English language learners who are adults, including professionals with degrees and credentials from their native countries. And it enables such adults to achieve competency in the English language and acquire the basic and more advanced skills needed to function effectively as parents, workers, and citizens of the US. Again, I hope you're starting to kind of see the crossover between TSTM and the immigrant integration framework here as well. Digital literacy skills, I think we're all pretty familiar with at this point, but we know that it's about using technology to find, evaluate, organize, create, and communicate. So all of those things are a piece of digital literacy, as well as developing digital citizenship and being responsible for our use of technology. Financial literacy is having the confidence and the knowledge and the skills needed to make financial decisions that promote financial self-sufficiency and stability, as well as, of course, their well-being. Health literacy is knowledge, skills, and ability to ask relevant questions, to get information that's needed or evaluate information for credibility and quality. And part of that is being able to communicate effectively and make critical decisions to promote both an individual's health as well as the health of one's family members or one's community. And finally, workforce preparation skills that's the knowledge, the skills, and the competencies that when developed are prepare individuals to obtain or retain employment or even to advance in the workforce. So which of these, I'm gonna have you annotate again because I love the annotate. I want you this time to annotate, which do you think is least frequently taught, either by yourself or at your program? Which topic area do you think is least frequently taught that you think your learners would benefit from? So in other words, which of these areas might you teach in the future that you don't frequently teach now? And if you're not a teacher, think about other teachers at your school. Which one do you think would be an important topic area to raise others' awareness of? Oh, lots of votes for financial literacy already. Couple votes for digital literacy, health literacy, as well as civics education. Yeah, and again, as you're looking at these topic areas, can you start to see the connection between the Immigrant Integration Framework and TSTM? Digital literacy, as an example, is one of those additional goal areas that we know was not only added, but also kind of transcends all of the goal areas. So start to see where the connections between TSTM and the Immigrant Integration Framework connect with each other. All right, and let me clear your annotate. Thank you again for participating in that. For the approaches that work, which is the third and final component of TSTM, there are 3 approaches that TSTM highlights, and that is problem-based learning, project-based learning, and integrated and contextualized learning. We're not going to get into the differences between the 3 today. I just want to say that we know that each of these approaches is research-based and it's effective in supporting adult learners to succeed in the classroom. And we also know that all 3 of these approaches allow learners to simultaneously build academic skills, soft skills, and content knowledge. So they can do all 3 of those, build skills around all 3 of those things rather than isolation. And we know that that supports best practices for adult learners. They're also learner-centered and learner-driven, so the learners are taking the front seat in the learning experience and they're actively involved in the learning process. So all of these approaches require collaboration and they promote opportunities for group work and communication, which many of you are working with language learners and you highlighted that need for building in opportunities to strengthen their linguistic skills. And so all 3 of these approaches offer those opportunities. So TSTM has 25 lessons that model and promote teacher instructional practices that are necessary to support immigrant integration at the classroom level. Each lesson uses one of the approaches to integrate language literacy and the skills that matter into meaningful content areas. The research shows that these are best practices for working with adult learners generally and with immigrant students. It also gives students a chance to build community with their classmates and practice their skills in a safe environment that can help empower them to really take those lessons learned with them outside the classroom, which again, if we go back to the Immigrant Integration Framework, that is our goal. As educators, we want to be setting them up for success within the safe space of the classroom and then empowering them to go outside the classroom to get the services, reach their goals that they may need. So finally, I want to share the link for the TSTM toolkit, which is found on the LINKS website. Participants in the community of practice, which we're hoping you all will join, will explore many of these resources, including several of those lesson plans in detail that I just mentioned. But those lesson plans and a lot of the tools that we've talked about today are available on this at this link, which we're putting into the chat. And so I encourage everyone to go to the TSTM toolkit and explore, as there are a wealth of tools and resources there and lesson plans as well. So those tools and those resources, again, that's really the how that I was talking about earlier with immigrant integration at the classroom level. There is another piece of the how that I'm going to turn it over to Marcella to highlight now.
Great, thanks so much, Hannah. All right, so we're going to look now at the EL Civics system and the co-op system. And just really quickly, so that I get a sense of who's in the room, could I get all of you to either type, or I guess I don't know if you know how to do a thumbs up with the reactions, or you can type yes, that you're familiar, or no, that you're not familiar with EL Civics and the co-op system in California. Right. Okay. Yeah, okay. All right. So I'm excited to see many thumbs up, many yeses. So that's great. We'll just look at it briefly here. But that's wonderful to know that you're all that many of you are familiar with it, and for those of you who are not quite yet, we'll share with you how to learn more. So just want to, it's always great for us to be on the same page, making sure we have common terminology. So EL Civics is based on a system of civic objectives, and also I know that we always call them co-ops, and sometimes it's helpful to take a step back and remind ourselves that co-ops stands for civic objectives and additional assessment plans. So I think key there again is the assessment plan piece for co-ops that that sometimes I know that it's easy to forget. So a CO, or a civic objectives, is a general competency. So for example, number 33 in particular is identify and access employment and training resources to obtain and keep a job. So a co-op is, again, it's an assessment plan. So it has 2 or more assessment tasks for each student level. So we talked a moment ago about the civic objective 33. And so co-op 33.7, one of the related co-ops, includes complete a job application and demonstrate successful job interview techniques. So you see here that it shows you how you're going to assess that students are meeting that objective, which I think is incredibly helpful, and it's very well written and clear, and it gives you great ideas for your instruction. We can go to the next slide. So again, to differentiate between the two, there are 59 civic objectives that can be used for 231 funding. Only 29 of the 59 have been designated for 243 funding. So that's something to keep in mind. And there are multiple pre-approved co-ops for each civic objective. And I see Lori Howard from CASAS is on the line. So Lori, if this has changed since December, please let me know. But as of December, there were 170 co-ops. And so I know that CASAS is really encouraging agencies to write new ones if you have new needs that arise, or if you have ideas of things that you want to do to better support your students. I know that the team at CASAS really does a fantastic job of collaborating and trying to make sure that what is available to the field is really meeting our needs. And Grace shared in the chat the complete list of the funded civic objectives and the list of co-ops. I think, yeah, thanks Grace for listing both of those. So how are we supporting immigrant integration in the classroom through civics education? Oh, sorry, before I do that, I did want to share with you the email address if you want to reach out to CASAS to get more information on the EL Civics pieces that I just shared about. That's a great way to reach them and ask questions. As I said, the team is fantastic. They're so incredibly knowledgeable, and they'll be able to help you there. All right, so supporting immigrant integration in the classroom through civics education. So supporting immigrants to integrate into the communities requires a focus on integration at many levels of service. And as I think Dave was the one who said very early on, that we have lots of different contexts in which we're providing or we're helping to meet the needs. So I wanted to take a moment now to explore how we can further support our immigrants in the classroom by focusing on civics education that relates to each of their goals beyond just what's in the classroom. So let's take a look here at how these different things that we've been talking about today kind of connect. So we started off by talking about the immigrant integration framework, and Hannah walked us through some of the goal areas, and it helps us or it can help instructors and programs map their curriculum to help learners reach their personal goals beyond the classroom, such as passing the U.S. citizenship test, running for the school board, or another civic leadership position, or even something like volunteering at a public facility. So then we also I just talked about the EL Civics and co-op system. That's another great way for you to create plans for performance-based assessments that can be used to ensure that our instruction and assessment is aligned to help our students learn the skills that they need to succeed as parents, community members, and workers. And then we also have TSTM, which highlights the specifics of how and what teachers need to include in their lessons to support the learning of important skills and topics that adult learners and immigrants need to succeed beyond the classroom. So you see these all come together to really support our teaching and learning, to ensure that we're meeting our students' needs, helping them be successful. Again, I know I'm repeating myself. We do this work in the classroom, but it's to help them be successful beyond the classroom so that they can really feel that they are important members of their community. With that, that's a great segue into our new community of practice that I wanted to share with you about. So we have, as I mentioned at the beginning, Hannah and I worked together to develop our new community of practice that will be launching in July. Will be available to you starting then. The goals are to enable instructors to understand the California immigrant integration context. Hopefully you got a little bit about that here, but you'll learn even more about that as part of this community of practice, and plan instruction that supports immigrant integration by being aligned with the objectives of the participation in civics and community life goal area of the immigrant integration framework, and by using the TSTM lessons and tools, and also the approved EL Civics metrics. If this sounds exciting to you, wonderful. We're really excited also to have you join us. It's intended for instructors teaching adult English learners. That it's not just ESL. We know that if you're working in an ABE program, if you're working in ASC, a GED program, you might also have students that are still English learners. So we think that it'll be really helpful for you there as well. Many of our participants we expect will be working in programs with IELCE funding, but it's definitely not a requirement to be able to participate. If you have not previously participated in a community of practice through CalPro, just want to provide you a quick overview of our format that we always use. It's a hybrid format that we use. So first, we start off always with a pre-session. So that's 2 weeks of online work, asynchronous, so you can kind of do it at your own pace. We do provide some deadlines to help you pace yourself. And in this, the pre-session in Moodle, you'll get an overview and we'll do some introductions. So you might see it reinforces a lot of the things that we learned about here today. Then we have synchronous session 1, which we'll be looking at supporting immigrants through TSTM. And that's through Zoom. We take 3 hours to take a really close look at how we can do this. Then we go back to our programs. In our interim session, we get to practice teaching a TSTM civics lesson to see what it looks like in action. We'll reflect on how that went, what adaptations we had to make. and how we think it helped our students. Then we'll come back together one last time for our synchronous session 2, where we will learn about supporting immigrants through the development of a civics education lesson. We'll use a gradual release model to do that. And the best part is the part that I'm most excited about is that at the end of the session, you'll come away with at least the beginning of your own civics education lesson that you'll be developing. And you'll have an opportunity to teach that, put your civics education lesson into action during the post session. And so you'll have an opportunity to finish, wrap up any tweaks that you want to make, teach the lesson, reflect on how it went, and also get feedback from others on suggestions of things. If you say, oh, this one thing didn't quite go the way I had hoped, others that are in the COP with you might have ideas of how to improve. So it's a great way for us to come together and as a community develop new lessons that will really help to support our students. So I encourage you to start planning now. I know that some of your programs might already be looking ahead. What are we going to do in this coming year? And as I said, the community of practice will be available through CalPro starting in July 2022. So if you are setting up or thinking about what professional development you want to participate in, please reach out to CalPro and we would love to help you with that. All right, so just a quick wrap up. I know we covered a lot of material today, so I'm going to ask you one more time to help, engage with us in the chat by responding to any of these prompts. My aha moments of the day, there could be something interesting or something useful that you learned, a change you want to make based on what you've learned, or I'm excited about or excited to. Okay, great. So Marin's excited about the community of practice. It sounds like we have a couple of people that are excited to join. Wonderful. So I'm going to ask you that to have your administrator reach out to us if your program would like to host our community of practice, and we can get that set up. The benefit of hosting it is that you can help to really determine the dates that takes place. Jody is excited to see how other educators will benefit from this program. Dave said, my aha was seeing the integration between the different components. Yeah, I'm excited. It's really great, Dave, to see. Dave is one of our, sorry to call you out, Dave, one of our coaches on TSTM for the TSTM project. And so it really is exciting to see all of these components and see how it can support what a lot of people are already doing in their program. And Colleen shared, this is all new to me, so my next step is to talk with some other people at my school to see if these tools are already in practice. Useful area, wonderful. And I know Jody is jumping off. I promised I wasn't going to call her out. Jody, go ahead and go if you need to go. But on our call, we also, in addition to Dave, we have 3 other superstars, Elisa, Jill, and Jody, all participated in our TSTM project with us, and Elisa's facilitated our pilot of the community of practice. All right, we have time for questions. I know we only have a couple of minutes left in our session. And Grace, if you don't mind, if you could go ahead, I know I see some people are jumping off. If we could put in the chat the link to the evaluation, that would be fantastic. And Dave is putting in a shameless plug for CCAE, for the CCAE conference. Lynette, we are not able to send out the slides, but the recording will be on our CalPro website I don't remember how long exactly it takes to get up there, but it should be, I would say in the next week or two. All right, well, I'm not seeing any other questions. So thank you all so much for joining us. It's always great to hear from you. Thank you for being such an engaged audience. It always makes a webinar go a little bit more smoothly and makes you feel better as a presenter. Thank you again, everyone. We'll see you at our next webinar. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, Dave.